My name is Megan, and I'm community manager at Auggie. And if you're not familiar with Auggie, Auggie is the #1 platform for parents to find community, share recommendation, and learn from experts. And just a reminder, this event is being recorded. So I want to introduce Dr. Tracy to you today. She is a clinical psychologist, couples therapist, and sought after relationship expert. She is the creator of Be Connected Digital, where she teaches people all over the world how to have healthy relationships. Her work has been featured in outlets like the New York Times, Forbes, and Time. And her research has appeared in peer-reviewed academic journals. And her upcoming book, which I'm so excited about, You, Your Husband, and His Mother, is about to be released. What's the release date for that?
November 4th. We're
Okay,
so
November
close.
1st, so just around the corner. She's also the author of the book, I Didn't Sign Up for This, and the host of the Top 100 Parenting podcast, Dear Dr. Tracy. The owner of Mental Health Clinic Integrated Wellness, and she's in Ottawa, Canada, with her husband and 2 children. She is not busy at all. Um, that is quite the resume. We're so happy to have you. And I am going to leave the chat on. So as we go, feel free to drop questions in the chat. This is just going to be a conversation as we're gearing up for the holidays. So as a thought comes to you, feel free to drop it in. Um, okay, so I would like to start by, um, well, I think, yes. Okay. So
I'll pause, Megan, to say, whenever I hear my bio being read out, and I've met so many wonderful people from the Auggie community before in my last conversation, but whenever I hear my bio being read, I think, this didn't just happen overnight. I've been doing this for years. And I also have a team. I have my husband that does the behind the scenes work. And it's always like, nothing. And that's just this like acknowledgement as mothers that nothing gets done in silos and we need a village and connection. And I think that's why this conversation, even around in-laws, is so important because
yes,
we need that family connection. And it's one of the top conflicts that couples have.
yes, this came at very timely as I received the Thanksgiving text from my mother-in-law this morning. So I'm ready to chat. Okay, so let's start by identifying one of the trickiest dynamics that show up, and that's the daughter-in-law and mother-in-law. So in your online community, 85% of women said they have conflict with their partner about their mother-in-law. So what is the reasoning behind why that relationship is so challenging?
Yeah, and I think this is such a timely conversation right now because I know so many women are saying we know differently. And so we want differently and we expect to experience something different. And so I know parents in this community are parenting in a different way from previous generations. We're trying to divide the mental load in a different way. We're showing up in the workplace differently than 30, 40 years ago. And when we do something differently, it can create tension and friction with somebody else. And so oftentimes then a mother then wonders, well, what role do I have in this family? And that can bring about insecurity for a mother. And it can also then tap into this questioning of, well, if I did it this way, does that mean that I did it wrong and that you are doing it in a better way? So a lot of insecurities can show up between two women. And I think there's this other piece in here too that I really want to acknowledge is that oftentimes women are the kin keepers. We think of almost like your mother-in-law or your mother or your grandmother, they're the matriarch. They're sitting at the head of the table. And it could be your father-in-law. It could even be conflict with another in-law or extended family member. But when you look at what women's roles tend to be, we know that we tend to be the kin keepers in families, which means we're holding the relationships, which means you're receiving the text, Megan, from your in-law about Thanksgiving dinner. It means we're the ones sending the family photos or saying to our husbands, hey, have you called your mom recently? And so we become this, taking over responsibility for managing not just our own families, but then also our partner's family. And
Yes.
then when we have children, we start to want to have more boundaries. And
Yes.
we don't want to then just do everything that our mother-in-law has maybe requested before. And it's a change, it's a drastic change. And so it's not, and I think this conversation is so timely. First, because of the holidays. And it's not to say that we want to cut out families. And I think this is where my book is really built to support women, couples, and families is to build healthy relationships so that we can have the holiday event without feeling like we have to play one of two roles. And I see daughters in law getting stuck playing either the victim role and not the pop psychology speak of the victim, but more in the sense of everything is happening to me. I have to
Right.
pack up the kids. My 3-month-old is crying in the car. We're driving 8 hours in the snowstorm because we have to be there on Thanksgiving dinner on the Thursday, right? So we feel like the victim, or women are then painted as the villain because you're setting boundaries and you're saying, I'm going to protect my family and say no to that holiday event and say no to traveling in the airports for those 3 days over the holidays. I'm going to say no, but then they're labeled as the bad ones.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, because these boundaries aren't being communicated by partners, and I'm speaking broadly, or because of patterns that show up, family systems, family dynamics that existed before you, daughters in law end up being scapegoated and they're made out to be the problem. And so instead, this book and this work is really about saying to you, how do you get a seat at the table? And you be the main character in this story because you matter. And when you have a strong marriage, when you and your partner are on the same team, parenting, you'll be more resilient. It won't be easier, but you'll get through it. You'll collapse on the couch. You'll high five each other like, oh, we did it. When you get that text from your mother-in-law, you can talk to your partner and be on the same team. Everything flows when you are secure and connected with your partner. And I see someone's also adding in
I
the
I know, I was about to
addition
say.
of stepkids. Yes, absolutely. Because then we're managing more families and more expectations. And so it's incredibly difficult.
I'm curious in the chat, if anyone here is a mother-in-law, um, or if everyone here is
Mm-hmm.
daughter-in-law. I'll be curious about that. We also have constant argument because my mother-in-law doesn't respect the rules and healthy habits I'm trying to teach my kids. So
Mm-hmm.
I have a question, and it might be jumping the gun a little bit, but my husband and I, we set a boundary around a holiday before we had children. Um, so that when we did have children, it was not a surprise, which I think almost made it, I don't know if it made it worse, it made it better for us, but I think it was shocking to our families, that we set up a boundary of like we always wanted to be home on Christmas morning.
Right.
We didn't want to be traveling, and like we did that pre-kids. And so I'm curious, like, do you feel like setting boundaries before you have children is a good idea, or is that not a good idea?
Whenever you tune into something that matters to you, that's the time to set the
Okay.
boundary,
Okay.
whether it's before kids or after. And sure, you could use hindsight and say, well, maybe I would do it differently. Or if we're just setting the boundary now that you have kids, you wish you had have done it differently earlier. I always come in with compassion and saying, you don't know what you don't know. And you acted in the best way that you could with the information that you had at the time.
Yeah.
And that's all that we can ask of ourselves. And so, Megan, I love that you guys were able to do that early on and say, like, hey, here's our wish.
Mhm.
And what you're talking about already is around what it means to set boundaries. So let's just jump all over the place because we're having a conversation and this is
Yeah.
where we always get the most of it. So I always encourage people put your thoughts and comments in the box. But let's even start with this boundary piece because a lot of people will say, what actually is a boundary?
Mhm.
And how do I set it? My mother-in-law is always crossing it. And in my book, I walk you through my 5-step vault method. So it is the skills and tools I teach my couples. It's intended to get your partner on board with you. You can do it on your own. If it's your mom, you can do it, or if it's another in-law, you can do it as well. But the 4th step is really going into that boundaries piece. And so when it comes to setting boundaries, we're talking about what I will or will not do. And boundaries require a second piece, which is an action. So, for example, I will not engage in body talk or politic talk at the table. That's not something I want to do. And I'm not going to gossip around other family members. I'm not going to gossip when they're not here and talk about people behind their back. That's my boundary. And then what happens is because we struggle with it, there's all these different things that come into play. And I talk about it in the book. I talk about 6 types of mothers in law, that it's not to diagnose your mother in law, but it's to understand who do you have in your family? What system are you building? Or working with rather. And then I also talk about the 3 styles of daughters-in-law. And I talk about it as styles because I find it's more fluid and flexible because we can change and control ourselves.
Mhm.
And so it really depends on who you are. But so you show up at the family um, event, and some people will have porous boundaries.
Mhm.
And in a porous boundaries place, politics comes up, and you say, "Oh, can we not talk about politics, please?" Well, it's really not helpful for, and then you give all the reasons, and then you start to argue about the research you're reading, and et cetera, et cetera. You've lost your boundary. Rigid boundaries is when you swing past healthy and you go to the other side. And that rigidity is, it's always the same boundary with every single person in every situation. And so if someone says, I never talk about politics, that's not a very good one. I never talk about like sleep. I never talk about sleep, my sleep methods. I never talk about parenting. Well, there might be people that you want to talk about with that and to open up those conversations. So then we want to go into something that's more flexible. And that flexibility is where you ask yourself, who am I talking to? What do I know about this person and how they can receive information? What kind of relationship am I trying to build with this person? What's the context? Context is so important in relationships between all of us. So, myself, my husband, and his mother. Can we all be on the same page to set these boundaries? Does she understand and respect it? And that will also depend on how you're going to express the thing. So here's
Mhm.
the boundary. When politics comes up at the table, I know for myself it's not what I'm going to engage in. And so I excuse myself from the table. Or if there's yelling at the table, then my partner and I, we're going to get up, we're going to take the kids and say, all right, we're out for a walk. We'll be back in a bit. And we go for a walk around the block. Because as soon as I say to somebody else, I don't want you to talk about politics, I am making a request. And
Mhm.
while others can respond to your requests and do that respect piece there, oftentimes people, and we know family members don't, will not respond to it in that way.
I love that because I think confrontation can intimidate so many of us. And so I think just simply excusing ourselves and doing something else or, not making it a whole, like drawing attention to like what made us get up and leave, but just simply like, we're going to go play outside for a few minutes. I love that. Um, why do so many of the women who are assertive and confident in other aspects struggle with the relationship with their mother-in-laws?
Yeah, this is such an interesting one. There's such complexity in there. And I think a lot of women do enter into these relationships wanting to please and to be liked. Of course, we have to recognize there's a power dynamic initially. And I do think that's where we start from. But then that power dynamic, so if we think of mother in law up, parents are up here and we're here, it starts to shift as you get older. I had one person I worked with that had shared she joined her husband's family at 15. So they were just teens,
Yeah.
but then was never accepted, was never brought into the family. And so initially she worked hard, so hard to be accepted into the family, to be considered an insider, and just nothing. And so that power dynamic is there. And of course, then as you get older, as that dynamic starts to shift, because now you have kids. And
Mhm.
now you're going to say, it's not okay to come in and hug my kids without giving them that body consent and body autonomy. That's not what we do in our family. Or it's not okay to come into my home and then to make these passive aggressive comments to me in my parenting style in front of my children. So that dynamic shifts. But it's really interesting because I have worked with women who are in top CEO positions, who are in the military, who have 6 children, who run their own CEO businesses, like just amazing, powerful, empowered women. And then when it comes to this position, it's so hard. And part of that struggle is also what happens with their partner. And
Mhm.
so there are some people where they're on the same page and both partners can say, I'm on this page with you. I get it. Let's build this boundary together.
Mhm.
But for many people, their partners don't see the need for the boundary. Their partner makes dismissive comments or denies that something was even that hard.
Right. So what is it about mothers and mother-in-laws that mothers and daughters don't have that dynamic?
Yeah, I think this one is so important to recognize because it helps to contextualize what's happening in your family and also in his family, if I'm thinking of a heterosexual couple. So for daughters, so for women, there's often this understanding that we go through an angry teenager stage. And I actually had a podcast episode about my daughter who had swore at me, and we got her a cake, and just to like, we love you. You said the thing. Here's a cake to celebrate you because expressing yourself is so important. And then we talked together while we all ate cake and laughed about it. She was 7, and we talked about how do we actually do this in our family. Anyways,
Right.
so women, girls, young girls are often first socially and emotionally more advanced from boys. So we see that early on in development, around 18 months, 2 years. And we see those kind of girl dynamics show up around grade 1, grade 2, the inclusions, exclusions. There's a lot of expression of feelings. Girls in general are taught it's okay to share your feelings.
Mhm.
Whereas for boys, often we think of generationally, boys were taught to suck it up, go back on the team, pull up your socks if you fell. And I saw it with the grandparents in our lives with my 2 kids. With my son, they're like, okay, buddy, get up. You got this. Keep going. And it's not ill intentioned. But then when my daughter joined the family 2 years later, it was much softer and nurturing and allowing her to cry and have all of her feelings. So that disparity there then teaches kids different coping mechanisms. And now as we go into adulthood, women are used to holding boundaries. We have been setting those boundaries with our family. We get angry at them and we know how to repair and come back and be close. But then men often struggle to do that in their families because a, a broad sweeping statement is many men are more avoidant. And so they've used more of those avoidant coping mechanisms as a way to deal with feelings with their parents or specifically mother. So they avoid, they minimize, they shut down, they compartmentalize, they don't address the thing heads on. And then, Megan, the challenge here is because there's been this pattern lifelong between husband or son and mother, then son finds a partner, and then partner comes in and says, "We have to like say no to mom. Like let mom know we're not coming for the holidays." And he doesn't know how to do it. Or he says, "Well, maybe we'll just go. Like let's just keep mom happy."
So as I have two sons and my husband and I just last night were talking about what like we hope that our children want to spend time with us and the holidays with us. And so like do you have any advice on ways like I can nurture my sons now at, ages almost 7 and 8 and like make it so that I am not that mother-in-law? Like I don't want to be, I want them to, enjoy and I want the healthy boundaries and all of that. Um,
Oh, Megan, you're so human. And this is like one of the biggest questions that I get. And it's also why in my book, it's the irony is that I finished narrating the book. And then when I got to the end, I thought, woo, this is robust. There's just so much in here. There's a little like it's almost like a rip. I envision people ripping out this section and giving it to their husbands of like, here, Dr. Tracy wrote this for you. And you just like give
yeah.
this like little like 5-page sample. But the section in there as well is how to be the mother-in-law that you want to be. And
Okay.
so I give 3 different stages, but I want to first emphasize this. So, as a mother to a son, here is what I know. You have a very special bond with him. Like with
Mhm.
both of your kids, you have a special bond.
Yeah.
And our children are constantly separating from us. And it's normal. And that's our job as parents is to help them create and become 2 separate beings.
Mhm.
I think of my son right now at 10. He's come into these hugs and connecting with me, and it's very
Yes,
sweet.
so
And
sweet.
then at the same time, the next hour, he says, Mom, I don't want to watch a movie with you. My friends are at the park. Can I go out to the park? I'm like, yes, like just,
I know,
go and do it.
I
But
know.
those are these constant moments that our babies, our children are separating from us. When your child, daughter or son, yells, I hate you, when they choose to play on their own instead of having you there, all of these moments. And so you then focus on building your relationship in this healthy way,
Yeah.
knowing that their job is to leave you, and
Mhm.
that because you know you have the security together, you've made space for their feelings, you give them autonomy. You say, hey, like, I don't view it that way, but I can see you view it that way. Cool. Like, tell me more about that. You
Right.
welcome in his partner.
Mhm.
Even if you don't like everything about them, you find something that you like and you welcome them in. And then you have that relationship. And in a healthy family system, there is this sense of flexibility
Mhm.
and not being responsible for anybody else's emotions. So one day down the road, you have an adult child and you call him up and he says, Mom, this year I really have to prioritize my partner's family. And you say, yes, you do. That's really important because this is your chosen person. So go and do that. Hey, bud, I'm upset because, I'll miss you. And let's make sure we plan for when we can be together. And right there is the two truths. I can
Right.
have my feelings
Yeah.
and I'm still going to turn you towards your marriage. And that's what so many mothers in law aren't doing today. They're
Yeah.
really struggling. And I'll speak in like more of like the unhealthy family systems. They're struggling to turn their children, their adult children, towards their partner
Yeah.
instead of getting stuck in these unhealthy family dynamics. I list 10 in the book. There's 10 that I know, whether it's you, his family, your family, you're going to connect to some of these and
Mhm.
just see that we don't want to keep repeating these.
That I love that you said that about the flexibility because I do feel like that is where the issues arise, right? When they're like, well, you didn't come last year or XYZ, instead of the kind comments that are like, you guys do what's best for the kids and and I also have a 10-year-old daughter and I have found myself thinking more about my husband's future partners and how that will like impact our family more so than my daughter and her whoever she chooses for her partner. And so I do think that that's so interesting. And so I'm going to take that to heart. I love what you said, and I'm going to practice that and keep and
Mhm.
read about that in your book. Okay. So also, guys, remember to put any questions in. We'll get into questions in about 5 minutes. If you guys have questions. Okay, so let's talk about now some like practical pieces, like communication hangups, tackling
Yeah.
the holiday conversation.
Yes. Let's go and be really specific because I want people to have something to take away from today. And then I know there's already a question in there that I want us to get to. I always find that when it's specific, we get more out of it. And then people can also grab the book and learn more with me and all the things there. So, what do we want to do leading up to the holidays? I remind people that families are consistent and predictable. And so, if you go to your family's house hoping this year they're not going to ask you about your sleep choices or make a comment about your parenting choices, of course, you hope that. You hope that people change. But we know that people tend to be consistent and predictable. And so instead of going in hoping that they change, you end up feeling frustrated. You maybe respond in a way that doesn't feel good. You hang out with your partner first before holiday events and you say to them, hey, knowing that we get to this hard place with your family or my family, what's going to feel good for us moving forward? How do we want to address this? And in the book, I walk you through identifying different types of behaviors that you'll want to identify, and then also what you're going to say in those moments. And again, the reason why I start in the book identifying those 6 types of mothers in law is because depending on who you're working with, the way you approach that boundary is going to vary. It will depend. And
Mhm.
so you might then say, okay, you know, mom always makes these comments about her parenting choices. Have we tried to say something to her past in the past? How has it gone? Does it go over well or does it not? Because that's going to lead you to then decide what to do. And so
Right.
then you're planning for what you're going to do in that moment. I had one couple recently where she had texted him during the holiday event. He swooped in, grabbed baby, and then they were back on the same team. And that was completely fine. They weren't fighting each other. Another one, they had a mother-in-law who would make these really difficult gendered sex type comments, and it didn't matter what they said to it. And so they had agreed that they would give each other kind of a nod across the room when she would do it, or he would squeeze her shoulder, like, I'm here with you, I get it. And then they would do the repair with their kids at home afterwards. So
Okay.
all of that is the planning ahead of time so that you know how you're going to respond. And
Mhm.
then you practice what that boundary is going to be, how you want to communicate the thing. I'm hoping the person shares a bit more, but if not, we'll still get to the example in the question box there. Um, and then afterwards, what's so important as a couple, because again, this is about you being on the same team, is talk about how it went afterwards. Do sort of that wrap up piece and talk
Yeah.
about what you each did well. So
Mhm.
you might say to your partner, I love how present you were with our kids this time. Or I love how we both didn't engage in those conversations and we just said we're going to ignore them and change the topic. Um, or I love how we decided that it was time to go because people were drinking too much and that didn't feel good.
Yeah. Okay, I love all of those. That is so helpful. Okay, let me look at the chat. Okay. Yes, it will be the recording will be in the Augie app. And you will also get an email linking to the recording with a recap of this conversation. So I love that you would like for your husband to watch. Okay, how do you recommend communicating your boundaries to your mother-in-law? Yes, it was the example of instead of um, having confrontation that you
Okay.
just get up and leave the table and say, we're going to go outside or we're going to
Yeah.
take a walk. I think if that's your question, if not, let us know.
Yes, sorry, I've probably been really unclear. Thank you so much for this. My question is, I think like there's the two stages is like well, there's probably more, but the two that I'm thinking of is setting the initial boundary and then what to do in an instant where that boundary is not being respected.
Mhm.
And I I'm guessing the example you gave of, it's important uh, to get up and, not
Yeah.
sort of challenge. Is that advice for when a boundary is being crossed rather than the initial setting of as in you do still need to, it is important to sort of expressly set your boundaries?
Yeah, I love this question. So there are going to be times and scenarios and people where you can do that work ahead of time, where you
Hmm.
can say to them, and I always say when it comes to setting boundaries, first, don't use the word boundary. It really leads people to hear like a cut and like I'm putting a wall up. And instead we want to think of like gates and doors. So you go to someone and you always start with that reassurance. And that reassurance sounds like we love seeing you. We love having this time with you. We know how much you love being grandma. All of those kind of we want to have time with you, that kind of piece. And then when we're actually communicating what it is, what that boundary is, we want to keep it concise and simple. So concise would be like it's important to ask our child if they want a hug before hugging them. So we're going to ask you to do that. Or it's we're not going to engage in politics talk at the table. And so then you can say, what are you going to do next? And you might say, so I'm going to change the topic. And so that's a scenario where you can share in advance. But oftentimes, boundaries are in reaction to what's happening in the moment. Oftentimes, there's not even a communication piece. It might just be an action piece so that when politics is coming up at the table, we're not going to say, hey, remember I told you we're not going to talk about politics. I mean, you might, and people might be in that relationship with you where they can hear that and say, oh, you're right. How did we slip down that road? Thank you so much. Let's course correct. Right? That would be like best case scenario. But most times people will deny your experience or they'll have a backlash. Oh, stop being so sensitive about that. Like, come on, Megan, it's just politics. We're going to talk about it. Right? And instead, it's the action that you're going to take. So the boundary sometimes is even the internal work that you're doing. Let's think of another one. There was another one up around kind of let's think of healthy habits or around food. So another one I hear is around the dinner table. And grandma says, you have to finish all your food before you
Oh,
get dessert.
yes.
I grew up in that household, and so did my husband. And in our family today, we don't do that. And I know some people still do, and that's okay. I mean, that's everybody's choice, right? But here's the thing. Even at your in-laws' house, even at your family's house, you're still the parent. And your kids need to know that you are that leader. I know Dr. Becky talks about being that like sturdy leader. So you be the leader. And then your boundary sounds like this. Actually, in our family, we don't have to clear our plate and kids still get their dessert. And that's all that it is. You
Mhm.
don't have to go into more. You don't have to go into rationales. You just simply provide it. And the analogy I used in another session recently with a client is think of it as how your child would communicate it. And so that's the beautiful thing, right? So what's a kid going to say when someone says, "Can I have a hug?" "No, I don't want a hug." Right? "Are you going to finish your plate?" "No, I'm not going to finish my plate." "What's for dessert?" Like, right? Like it's just there's no beliefs or attachments to it. There's no
Statement. Yeah,
rationalizations or over explaining.
matter of
And
fact.
And that's often where we get stuck with the boundary pieces. So then your mother-in-law comes to you and says, "Oh, you're still breastfeeding? When am I going to get to hold sweet little baby? How long are you going to be doing this?" And so you say, "Yes." You do the boundary thing, right? The boundary thing sounds like, "I know how much you love being grandma, and this is the choice that we're making." But then some of the good girl daughters-in-law do, or are people pleasers, or more of the porous boundary people, what they do is they're like, "The research says, and then also this says, and here's all this reason. And have you heard about Auggie? And we're learning all these things," right? Like, so then we start to do all these over justifications and over explaining, which when you do that, here's the key piece: you give permission to that person to ask about that
Mhm.
inexplicitly, or sorry, implicitly. You have given them permission. Go ahead and asking about it. Does that
Okay,
answer the question? I think so.
yeah, let us know if that answers your question. I want to ask,
Oh, can I follow up on that? What if you are
yes.
immediately challenged to provide a rationale? "This is our decision."
Mm,
"Yeah, thank you for asking. This is our decision." Or you might say, "That's not something we're really willing to go into," and be prepared to change the topic. I
mhm.
love going like in Canada here, we're going to talk about hockey. The Leafs this year, whoo, my goodness, can you believe it? Or, maybe you're talking about the Chiefs or like, ooh, Taylor Swift's album coming out. Have you guys heard that one? Like, have it prepared because they do that, right? Or thinking of who your in-law is. "Oh, were you back at the bridge club this week? Like how's Tai Chi going? What's going on with your social group there? Like tell me about that."
Mhm. Okay, so there's so many things I wanted to get to. I don't think we'll have time. I do want to take questions. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was the getting stuck in the middle, and that's the next question is getting your husband on board with speaking up
Yeah.
against the negativity, because I know sometimes we can feel like we're the ones conveying how we feel.
Mhm.
You mentioned that earlier. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And also too, Megan, I know when we had outlined our conversation today that it was very ambitious with all the questions in there.
I mean, it's great conversation. So
Yeah, I
just
love
if
it.
there is something that you want to mention, feel
Mhm.
free to
Yep.
throw it in. I just want to make sure we get to the questions.
Yeah, let's switch to questions. I think this is a good piece. So,
Okay.
okay, tips on getting my husband on board with speaking up against negative and critical comments. Yeah, I think there's this element here where does your partner even hear them? So,
Mhm.
in the second step of my vault method, so the vault method is this idea that you two are this secure vault structure, and that once you have this secure structure, then you can go to families, et cetera, and set boundaries because you're on the same page. And oftentimes, one of the biggest things I hear is that you're not on the same page. Your husband doesn't see the reason for it, or they don't even catch it. And so I talk about in the book what happens in our nervous systems when we're around families. And for a lot of people, they go on autopilot. They
Yeah.
shut down, right? Oh, I feel so validated. Thank you. Yes, right. But it's like it's almost like they just don't see it. Or then afterwards, what you do is you say to your partner, you get in the car, and you're like, "Oh, I can't believe your mother did the thing." And he's like, "Oh, this is like it's not that big of a deal." So recognizing first that your husband is in a family system and you're going to be more aware of the negative comments, critical comments. Guilt tripping is a common one that I see many men don't see because they've grown up in it and they've learned to be desensitized to it. And so then I think this is the conversation ahead of time where you say to your partner and not in a critical way, you say, "I'm looking forward to this time together." You might not know. There are these times where these comments come and they feel really hard. And I would love for us to come up with a plan for what to do.
Mhm.
And in the book, I outline really that question is like, well, what if we make this plan and my husband doesn't do anything. Because, of course, when he's trying to change with you, it's going to be really hard. And
Mhm.
sometimes the most protective thing you two can do is to agree that there's some kind of boundary in that moment. Maybe you don't say anything. And then you guys are on the same page after, where
Mhm.
he can say to you, I am so sorry. I heard it. That hurts. It's not cool. But again, having my little rip out section in the back of the book, this is the thing that I say to men. When you do nothing, you are part of the problem. And you are actually making all of these relationships worse because that triangle piece is it's not that you're in the middle of your wife and your mom. It's not that your wife is in the middle of you and your mom. It's that you are all in a triangle and all of your relationships are impacted when you do nothing. And
Mhm.
so there might be an element where your partner has to kind of step into that position and say, Mom, not cool, move on. Right. And it doesn't have to be this big uproar.
Right.
But I also just really want to hold the context of this, which is really like when I think about why did I write this book? It's because it's that repeated experience where we just are not on the same page. We don't know how to do this. And it's an entrenched family system that is so hard to change.
Yes. Okay, feel free to drop. We have time for a couple, maybe two more questions if there are any. And then Dr. Tracy, just any more practical tips as we are now in holiday season. It's going to be here in just a second. So anything just very practical that you can leave us with.
I think one of the best things that people can hold in mind is that it's not a you versus me. So when
Mhm.
it comes to our partnerships, we really want to do a you and me versus the problem. And the
Mhm.
problem is, how do we go to this family event feeling good and connected? This is
Mhm.
all about connectivity. This is all about being on the same page and being able to repair those hard moments. So, how do we do that? And it all starts even with our own communication. When we go to our partners, and again, this is where I had said the book is so robust because my years of communication work is in one chapter, and I'm going to teach you how to identify what are your arguments really about, because oftentimes it's about core needs and longings. Do
Mhm.
you see me? When
Right.
you say to me that my mom's or that your mom's negative comment is not a big deal, I feel unseen. I feel like I don't matter. And if I can't express that to you, we're going to keep battling this out. And
Mhm.
then I walk people through setting boundaries that come from needs.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, boundaries are not about not feeding the kids candy. I mean, there's a
Right.
safety element in that, but boundaries are often rooted in our values and our core needs. And
Yes.
that's really important to identify.
So good. Okay, okay, we have this question. Okay,
Mm.
this will be the last question we'll take because we'll be out of time. Can you elaborate on how to encourage your husband to say no to family requests? For example, his father wants to smoke cigars every time they meet. It started as celebration only, now it's every time. We have an under 1 year old and the smoke concerns my and with the smoke concerns. My husband has to take extra steps to ensure it's safe to be with the baby afterwards. It's frustrating and I'm not sure how to set the boundary. I would say I have the same question surrounding alcohol at some of
Hmm.
my extended family gatherings. They've put alcohol at eye level when my kids were toddlers. Um,
Oh, gosh.
and so that was very concerning for
Mm.
me. So
Any substances,
yeah, any
absolutely.
substances, yes, around children. Curious about that.
I remember working through this with a client, and we had navigated this in the way that she had to communicate. So it was cigarette smoke to her father, that you cannot wear those clothes around my newborn, around
Mhm.
my baby. And the father was very upset to hear this and gave the silent treatment for a while. That was really hard for this client. She had to work through what that felt like and navigating that, and also really trusting that this was an important boundary. And this really is where I think parents are struggling so much, is because it's like I'm trying to protect my family. And then my parents are upset, not understanding where we're coming from or not kind of listening and respecting to those boundary pieces. So
Mhm.
I would say that you have to set up some kind of structure with your husband and he has to communicate that. What does that look like?
So she's asking how can she encourage her husband to say no?
Oh yeah, go back up to encourage your husband to say no to family requests.
like the smoking cigars.
Yeah, I mean, your husband ultimately has to see it as a problem. And
Mm,
that's the conversation between the two of you. And then you being able to say, can you say no to him? And what would that be like for you to do that? And what gets in the way of doing that? What's important about doing it? Oftentimes we go to our partners really just saying like you have to do this instead of kind of and we do this in the therapy process as well. It's like walking around the issue.
Mm,
What matters about this to both of us? How is this connected to our values? Why is this important for our little one? You know, what can we say if your dad is upset when we put structure around this? How can I support you to say no in that? How
I
can
love
we then do
that.
it together as a group text or a family structure in some way? Um, and then again, it really is that taking action so
Mhm,
that if they go out for the cigar at the family event, then you have to decide what you're going to do in that moment.
mhm.
And it's unfortunate because then other family members, I mean, they'll be disappointed if you say, okay, well, we're having to head out because the smoke's not good. And that's
Right.
uncomfortable, but that's you taking action.
Yeah.
And I think about one, and it was around alcohol use. And again, it was when people started to drink more, she would pack up the kids with the husband and they would leave. And it's a, you know, we're not going to stay for this part of the event. And so your events maybe are shorter, maybe it's not as frequent, maybe it looks different.
Mm,
It's a tough one.
it is tough. Okay, this conversation was so good. I feel like we could talk for hours around this topic. The questions were so insightful. I hope that you guys left feeling like you've got some knowledge. You can find Dr. Tracy's book in the Auggie shop. And
oh,
also, where else can we find it, Dr. Tracy?
Oh, it's available on all formats. I always say to people, if you have an independent local bookshop, go check them out because they're amazing and they're really what brings books to life. So it's here, it's robust. There's so much. Oh, people are going to walk away with
So
so
ex-
much in
so
that book.
excited about it. So timely as
Yeah.
we gear up for the holidays. And if this brought up thoughts or questions, feel free to continue this conversation in the Augie app. We have a whole community of parents navigating these same issues. And like I said, the recording will be in the app. And so we're here if you need us. Dr. Tracy, thank you so much for your time and your
Thank you, Megan.
wisdom. It was so beneficial. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Okay, we'll talk to everyone later. Bye bye.